climate is the main parameter that influences production and productivity. If the climate is not predictable, if the climate is not conducive for the production of agricultural produce, that obviously has a bearing on agriculture.
At the end of this conference, what are the things that agriculture as a sector can say we are doing ABC to do our part to deal with climate change?
Well, by the mere fact that agriculture produces crops, it actually contributes positively. Of course, in the production process, it also has a negative effect. The important thing is to be able to have sufficient information, knowledge, and capacities to be able to mitigate whatever negative impacts we have on climate change, as well as to adapt to the changing climate environment. And more importantly, for us to be able to have the technology, the finance, and other resources to do whatever is necessary for us to at least maintain production levels, but more importantly, to increase as well as sustain increased production in the future.
Mr. Sunga, thank you very much for joining us. We hope agriculture does get a clear text at the final agreement that will come out of the COP17 conference. That's Mr. Ishmael Sunga from the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions, talking about specific things they want, specific mentions that relate to agriculture when we come out of COP17 here. Let's take an ad break. We'll talk a bit more about this later in the program.
Hello, you're watching a special broadcast of the climate change talks that have been taking place here in Durban at the Albert Luthuli International Convention Center, and the Kyoto Protocol and other issues have been sharply into focus. The African continent has come together in a grouping and has presented its proposals to the gathering here and its wish list of what they're hoping will come out of there. Joining me now is the AU Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Economy, Ms. Tumsini Peace. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Now, we spoke a few days ago about some of the concerns and issues that the African Union as a bloc has. We're at the 11th hour now, the last day of talks. Are you happy with the way that the negotiations have gone so far?
I think you can see the weather in Durban has changed. It means more thinking, and I can see that we are focusing more and better and more strategic. I can see that there's a lot of tide turn, and when you see a country like the US beginning to soften, then it gives us hope, we in Africa. So far, I think the continent should be not very happy, but I think we should get something out of these negotiations. Durban is crucial, you know.
All right, what do you think you're going to get? I mean, the Green Climate Fund is certainly a huge step in the right direction. There seems to be some kind of consensus on that.
That's wonderful, because Africa would like to see adaptation high on the agenda, and the Green Climate Fund is very, very important, because this is going to facilitate all the different investments for us. Of course, there are issues of accessibility and availability, and so the mechanism finalized for us is very positive. Very.
Now, you're responsible for agriculture and rural economy at the AU. That's your particular responsibility. Some are saying that the word agriculture should actually feature more prominently in the final text, whatever form it takes.
Yes, as you know, in Africa, about 80% in many countries depend on agriculture. Agriculture on the continent matters a lot. Without agriculture, I think we cannot have our life moving on. Negotiations this time in Durban have had a real focus on agriculture, and the chapter, the content, the issues which are going to come out, I believe agriculture will feature highly. Well, it may not be well defined as at this point, because it is the first time that agriculture is being featured as a key priority, and this is very, very important. We have partners like Norway, like some of the countries in the EU. They want to see agriculture high on the agenda, but then of course others don't believe that agriculture still matters. But for us in Africa, we want to see agriculture, issues of water, because all those are intertwined, feature highly.
All right, what is the African continent and African nations doing for itself? Because a lot of what I've been hearing is seeking assistance and help from the developed nations, asking them to come to the party with funding and other facilities. What about us as a continent? What have we been doing?
I think Durban has shown that Africa is more ready than ever before. When you move around all the pavilions and you look at what has been showcased within the African pavilion, then you know that Africa has taken the bull by its horns. They have been able to show all the various initiatives. They may not be of large magnitude because of the challenges of resources, limitations of having numbers, of looking at the issues of population and all that. But I think Africa has said, no, we are not going to be seen as a sinking continent. And when you look at the papers now, the front page show Africa is rising. So that one is very positive.
All right, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Thomasine Peace.
Thank you, Daniel.
That was Thomasine Peace, who's the AU Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Economy, talking to us about Africa's position, Africa's wishes, and also the initiatives that the continent has already taken, and very optimistic that Durban may actually just produce a result. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we've seen a number of demonstrations taking place around this facility, this convention center, a lot of them mostly peaceful, and we've seen young people come wearing the most colorful clothing to express their concerns and to show the world and the leaders here and the negotiators here actually that they need to do something and do something very quickly. And one of these protest groups were from Japan. Japanese youth called on world leaders to start weaning themselves off nuclear energy, nuclear power. And this, of course, comes off the back of March this year, where we saw this massive earthquake and tsunami hit the coast of Japan, and the Fukushima nuclear plant there started leaking and caused quite a lot of damage. And so there's been concern about nuclear energy, and this is what was expressed by the Japanese youth.
Japan, victim of 9 magnitude earthquake. The March quake and tsunami were the worst in its recorded history. Demonstrators protested outside the Albert Luthuli Convention Center, the venue of the climate change conference. Back home in Fukushima, people are still living in shelters and temporary houses after the nuclear disaster. These youths want the government to stop using nuclear power as a solution to global warming.
Our message is it is ensured that a nuclear power plant is very efficient to generate electricity, but we need to enhancing the safety of nuclear power plant and gradually shift to renewable energy.
We don't have to use nuclear power, but use renewable energy. We have to shift to renewable energy. No more pollution! No more.
The Kyoto Protocol was also born in Japan. The youth here don't want to be at the mercy of worsening global warming. Instead, they are agitating for change. Nomaoto Solwandle, SABC News, Durban.
All right, so that's the position taken by Japanese youth, very concerned about nuclear energy. And this is one area, unfortunately, that some developing nations, such as South Africa, still need to use to solve its energy issues. But other countries in developing world, such as Germany, have already started scaling down their use of nuclear power. And that, of course, has been highlighted, as we saw in that insert, with what happened in Fukushima in Japan earlier this year. All right, let's join Blaine Herman now, who's at the People's Space, to find out what the voice has been of the activists there.
Yeah, Peter, as you see, civil society really tried their best to get their message across. Things at times did get a bit heated, as we saw some of the visuals over the past 2 weeks or so. But to explain some of these issues, we're joined by Vishwas Satka. He's from the civil society group. So, Vishwas, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Firstly, was it a battle getting your message across over these past 2 weeks?
Well, yes, there was a climate of fear and intimidation created. On the International Day of Action, our delegation of about 500 activists peacefully assembled were physically attacked by people wearing green tracksuits issued by the city of Durban, saying COP17 volunteer. Posters were torn, our banners pulled down. One of our banners was calling for 1 million climate jobs, a clear message around Africa is burning currently, and so on. There was violence that was aimed at us, and we protected ourselves and also restrained ourselves. Throughout the march, these people stood in front of us without the police intervening and constantly intimidated us and provoked us. So we were not there. We could not celebrate the kinds of alternatives that we wanted to put forward, because this is what the march was all about. Secondly, yesterday in the City Hall, there was a call to consult with the President of the country. And, when civil society speaks, we speak with our T-shirts, we speak with our banners, we speak with our posters, and we speak with our voices. So people went with all of this. And sadly, people were prohibited from flashing their posters or their banners. It seems as though the whole situation was stage managed. In the end, activists were physically, again, harassed. They were forced to put down their posters. 2 women activists were beaten up. An activist of the Democratic Left Front who went in to protect them was beaten up, spat on, dragged out of the hall.
We did speak to the city yesterday, and they said that from their point of view, no one was mishandled. But in terms of these incidents, alleged incidents, if you will, has it soured civil society's taste for COP17?
I think there's 2 issues here. I think the city has a case for the violence to answer. I think there's 3 questions they have to answer. One is, why were COP17 volunteers, who were meant to be ambassadors of the city and the country, allowed on the march and allowed to police us the way they did in the City Hall yesterday? The second is, why were they given instructions? Because from our information, these groups were linked directly to the mayor's office to attack us and intimidate us. And thirdly, the city needs to tell us why we shouldn't ask the public protector to investigate the abuse of public finance to finance an ANC goon squad. Now, I think that's the first set of issues which relate to the nature of our democracy, our rights of assembly and freedom of expression, which for me are under attack, not just us as organizations and activists. I think the second issue, though, is that we are not convinced that the COP is going to deliver the necessary outcomes to solve the climate crisis. And in that context, street politics has been very, very important for us. Peaceful, non-violent street politics. This morning, we spent the past 3 hours handing out this sticker, which basically says COP17 equals 200 million climate deaths. It was our last attempt in a Gandhian kind of way to appeal to the consciences of the people that are making the most important decisions that will affect us, future generations, and the planet, essentially to understand the gravity of what they have to decide.
Vishwas Satka, thank you very much indeed. Let's leave it there. Vishwas Satka from the civil society groups. Peter.
Blaine, thanks very much. Food security and agriculture continues to be one of the themes that we've been exploring today. It's an important one, and certainly on the continent here in Africa, where we're affected adversely by climate change factors. And earlier in the week, we spoke to a gender activist who was saying that women in particular were being affected when climate change happens, because they have turned out to be the subsistence farmers on our continent, feeding their families. Well, the World Food Programme, which is the food programme wing of the UN, is also concerned about food security, and would like it to have a bigger space in conferences such as this one. And to tell us a little bit more about that, and I'm joined by the Deputy Director of the World Food Programme, Sheila Sisulu. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
All right, so as the WFP, you come to a conference such as this. What are your hopes that will come out to address the specific needs that you're seeing?
Our hope is that conferences such as these, and in particular this one in South Africa, in Africa, will put people first and will recognize that women matter and that food security and smart agriculture cannot be separated from the debates around climate change. Because, as you already said in your introduction, 80% of the food consumed at household level, especially in Africa, is produced by women. And when, as we already see, we've seen in the Horn of Africa, when a shock such as the drought happens, men try and find greener pastures. Women stay home because it's better to do that. But then they cut down on consumption of food, they cut down on quality, nutritious food for themselves and their children. So it's very, very important for us that these issues are included in the discussions and are taken seriously to see how we make sure that food security, women's health and children's health are part of the adaptation and even mitigation programs of COP17.
Well, we've come almost to the end of COP17. Are you optimistic that there'll be something in there for your hopes?
Of course, I'm always optimistic, but I think that's also fueled by the fact that the hosting government, the president of South Africa, has in various side events raised the issue of food security, agriculture, smart agriculture if you want, and women. So has President Zenawi Meles of Ethiopia, who's the lead president of the negotiating team for Africa. They have all linked those issues in. It remains now to the negotiators to see that as an integral. It's not an extra. It's not a side issue. Without people being saved for the impact of climate change, we stand to lose millions of people to climate change.
All right, and that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so that was the voice of Sheila Sisulu, who's the Deputy Director of the UN's World Food Programme, highlighting the importance, of course, of food security, the role agriculture plays, and particularly the role that women are playing, and that they really should be carefully considered by the negotiators and any kind of agreement or statement that comes out, hopefully today, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll continue with more from COP17 here in Durban after this break. Welcome back. You're watching this special broadcast that we've been having every single day here on SABC3, covering the climate change conference that's been happening here at the Albert Luthuli International Convention Center. Now, we continue to explore some of these important issues, from a landfill site to a green living space, now also an educational facility. That's the Bluff Eco Park, which is proving to be a simple example of what's at stake at these particular talks as they unfold, how humans are coexisting with nature, and it's about the mitigation and coping mechanisms for the future. Sandam Becher has been taking a look.
The journey of the Bluff Eco Park started 7 years ago. This was a home for garbage, polluting the earth.
We started with the big stuff first, take out all the alien trees and get it back to wetland status. This is an old wetland. So that was step one. Step two, to start zero impact building. So we put up the offices that's made of thatch and wood, zero impact. And step three, start planting. So we started 3 years ago. Every year we plant 365 trees.
It was then turned into a living space for people to learn and play. This tree here is one of the oldest in Durban, providing oxygen for about 140 years.
We teach the impact of transportation. It's one of the big 5 polluters. Next thing is construction, huge polluter. So all the buildings we build here is done from materials that have lost their purpose. Like the event center, the living spaces, uses containers as base. But the next big polluter obviously is electricity. Dirty, especially in South Africa. Whereas in Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya, it's all hydroelectric. Here it's fossil fuels. So here in the park we run on biofuels by generation. But as you can feel today, the wind is blowing. We have a wind turbine and we have solar. So we again show all of the different ones.
Even the lighting here is done with LED bulbs using less power. Newer projects include a rugby facility and a vegetable garden. More steps to make this dump site self-sustainable. Sandam Becher, SABC News, Durban. Well, from that eco park to more activity right here at the ICC. Whilst we were walking around the tea garden, we found a protest with a very interesting banner that says Save Kyoto. Of course, the Kyoto Protocol has been a big issue here at the COP17 Climate Change Conference. Please tell me, what's this protest about?
The Kyoto Protocol is the only legally binding climate agreement we have, and we really need to save it, which means that we need to see a second commitment period. And we try to influence the politicians so that they can save the Kyoto Protocol and save us all.
Why the Kyoto Protocol specifically, when there's talk about a new single framework that includes everybody that wasn't even included in the protocol to start with?
Yeah, but the Kyoto Protocol is the only legally binding agreement that we have, and we feel that it is really important to build on that.
Do you think this protest maybe will have some influence or some impact on the results that come from tonight?
We hope so. We have faith.
That's protesters here around the tea garden at the ICC. They have faith that their protest is the second protest of this nature that we've bumped into this week. They're hoping they will make a difference. We'll hear later this evening when the text of the COP17 Climate Change Conference comes out. Nomawetu is somewhere at a very beautiful spot. Let's go check in with her.
Well, thank you, Asanda, and welcome back to the Palmite Nature Reserve, which is situated west of Durban. Indeed, this is a very beautiful space. Well, in the past 2 weeks, we've been talking about climate change and what it means to go green, and there's been a lot of focus on government and the big companies. Well, this nature reserve says going green starts right at the bottom, at community level. Now, we are joined by Jean Senegals, who is a community member here at this nature reserve. Good morning, Jean, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. It's lovely to be in my reserve.
What does it mean to go green? How can we say that this nature reserve is green?
Well, it is, of course, a green area. There's a whole lot of trees and plants that make it green. But it's a repository for our plants. When I say our plants, the plants that are local to the Palmite area and to Westville area and, in fact, this coastal belt. And so it's an important place where we can preserve and conserve our plants and animals, and of course also the other organisms, viruses, bacteria, fungi, that all keep the systems going.
A lot of spaces like this in other cities are usually taken over by housing development. How have you kept this space going, and how have you involved the community?
That's an interesting question, because we were the first reserve in the greater metropolitan area to get the status of a reserve. So it's very difficult now to try and turn that back, to make it, say, low-cost housing or anything, any sort of so-called devastation. Some people call it development, I call it devastation. So in that way it has been protected. And it was a community-based demand that we have our reserve here. It started 40 years ago. Mike Cottrell, who was the local geographer, teacher here at Westwell Boys, said, please, we need an area, a witness area, where we can have our plants and our animals of this area. And subsequently, our schools have worked here, our scouts are here, our cubs are here, our bird clubs, bat interest group. This is a well-used reserve.
Very briefly, Jean, how can we link what's going on at this nature reserve to what's being discussed at the COP17 conference?
Well, at the COP17 conference, they're discussing climate change and how things are going to be altered worldwide. Well, right here in the reserve, we see that, because with climate change, we'll have an influx of people, a pressure on these precious areas, and not only that, we have the invasive alien plants and animals moving in and disrupting the whole working system, the natural working system. These areas are important because we need it. Well, they are our oxygen factories for a start, and they are areas where we can have our students work. The university, we've got the campus, the Westville campus, right on our doorstep. They send their students in here who work here. We've got Westville Boys. We've got very important young people working in this reserve. So it's an important place, and they will be monitoring what climate change will do and is doing to this reserve.
Well, thank you very much for your time. That was Jean Senegal. She is a committee member here at the Palmit Nature Reserve, telling us more what it means to go green. Well, that's all we have for now. We will be back a little bit later. We'll be talking to a youngster who's been involved in the day-to-day running of this nature reserve. But for now, it's back to you, Peter.
Sandra, thank you very much indeed, and we've heard quite a number of female voices on the program today, and we certainly make no apologies for that, because I think particularly with the issues that we're dealing with, agriculture, it's affecting women the most, and we're going to find out a little bit more about that after the break. But my first conversation when we do return is going to be with South Africa's Environment Minister, Edna Molewa. Stay with us for that. Hello, welcome back to COP17. This is where climate change talks have been taking place for the past 2 weeks, and well, today is the final day, and there's still hopes that some kind of a deal can be thrashed out by the 194 conference of parties that have been negotiating, particularly around the issue of the Kyoto Protocol, which is going to run out next year. What happens next? That's a big question that needs to be answered today. Now, earlier on I spoke to another one of our strong female leaders that have been running the game here in South Africa. We have Maite Nkwana-Shaban as the COP president, but also heading the South African team at the negotiations is the Environment Minister, Edna Molewa. And I spoke to her a little bit earlier this morning about how things have gone so far and whether she was optimistic that there would still be a deal on the table. Of Environmental Affairs, Edna Molewa. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to your viewers.
Minister, we spoke 12 days ago, and you seemed optimistic, actually, that we might have some kind of a positive outcome here. 12 days on, very little sleep in that time. Are you still optimistic that today something might come out?
Well, certainly we are very optimistic still. We do believe that a lot of work has been done. Our negotiators have put their efforts. And up until yesterday, there's been a lot of discussions coming through, but sifting through the text. Many areas of work of the text has already been sifted through. We're now dealing with the bigger issues, and certainly ministers are here. What I can say really, which is so good, is that you see people who really are willing to get to find a solution. I mean, I was there sitting among those ministers yesterday and really looking at them, all of them working, talking to each other, trying to, see how we can, find something that can actually help the humanity and help this world. But even as late as night, early hours of the morning, people are still saying, let's work, let's work, let's work.
Fingers had been pointed to certain countries, developed nations, America among them, Canada. Yesterday, America surprised many by saying that they back an EU plan for a roadmap to a New Deal. What's South Africa's position to the EU plan?
Oh, yes. Certainly, I think how we should look at this matter is that we shouldn't say there's a particular plan that people are saying we support this plan. It's a combination of people's plans. And America certainly was saying so because they also came with their own position. We came as Africa with our own position, G77 plus China. But as I was saying earlier on, teams and groups, different groups, were trying to say, let's look at the elements of what EU is proposing, let's look at elements of what Africa is proposing, let's look at ourselves as EU. So I think the product, even that's what's going to come out of here, is a product that people would have looked at. And of course, I think I must say, the presidency also did a good job, and their negotiators, our negotiators as well, too, through listening to people in a very transparent manner and saying what we hear coming out of this and pulling those things together. So what comes out of here is really thoughts of many people and various groups.
That was Edna Molewa, South Africa's Environment Minister, and also the lead of the South African delegation that's negotiating here at COP17. Now, we've been talking about food security. Well, women in agriculture has certainly been a big issue at COP17 this year as a result of the climate change issues and how they're affected through droughts and also excessive rains spoiling their agricultural practices, and they, being the primary subsistence farmers, are unable to feed their families. So to talk a little bit more about that, I'm now joined by Winnie Byanyima, who's from the United Nations Development Programme. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme.
Thank you for inviting me.
So women in agriculture, we're talking about climate change and how they can be affected. Is it already happening, or is it something that's still on the horizon?
Well, the evidence is that indeed the planet is warming, climate is changing, and that is having impacts all over the world. The scientific evidence is there. And the impacts are hitting hardest in the developing countries, the poor countries that don't have the resources to prepare for frequent droughts, for frequent floods, for the challenges of public health, for the challenges of famine. It is the poorest countries that are most challenged. And within those, it is women, poor women, who face the greatest hardship in terms of responding to the various impacts. In agriculture, indeed, when the climate changes and this impacts on food production is primarily the work of women, particularly in a continent like Africa. When there is less and less firewood, less and less water, the earth is not producing the food, women take longer, have to find savings from every corner.
So it's quite urgent, but what can be done to help them?
Very much, and that's why we're very hopeful here, because really it is an issue of climate justice. global warming has come about because of carbon emissions by the countries that are most developed. And it is really a challenge that those countries now put down resources for the poorer countries to respond and adapt and mitigate the impacts. Because the developing countries want to develop but don't necessarily want to develop by emitting yet more carbon, but to go on a low carbon, climate resilient growth path requires additional resources to the very scarce resources that they have right now for fighting poverty, reducing inequalities. So in order for them to develop along a low carbon path, they need the resources that are coming from the richer countries who caused the global warming. So that's why climate financing, the Green Carbon Fund here, is a critical issue where we want a decision.
And that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay. Well, let's continue with our conversation. Blaine is at the People's Space at the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
Indeed, I am live from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. While exerting pressure on world governments, that was the aim of civil society. Let's take a wrap of things now. We'll speak to Tristan Taylor from Earth Live Africa. Tristan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a busy 2 weeks for you guys.
It has been a very busy 2 weeks. We've done quite a lot of stuff. We've got an alternative space up and running. We had a climate refugee camp, which was accommodating 2,000 people at its peak. We had a very big march. There's a lot of people inside the process doing lobbying, talking to governments, talking to our government, launching publications. So it's been a very long 2 weeks.
Was it, do you think you made big enough impact, do you think?
No. I think that it's going to come out of the negotiations. It'll be quite depressing, and it's definitely going to be not enough to solve climate change.
In terms of, what you're hoping to get now, where does it stand?
Well, I think what we will get, not what we hope to get, but I think what we will get is we'll get the architecture of the Green Climate Fund, but it'll be empty architecture. There's no money for it. They'll discuss that over the next couple of years. So, it's a small victory, but not a very big victory, and won't provide the financing that Africa needs, at least in the short term. We might see some kind of fudge on a second commitment to the Kyoto Protocol, but I don't think we'll see anything substantial. And will we fundamentally see a deal that will keep global temperatures to 1.5 or 2 degrees or even 2.5 degrees? I doubt it. And that's the tragedy of this COP.
Tristan Taylor from Earth Live Africa, thank you very much indeed. Let's leave it there. Peter.
All right, well, let's start wrapping up and saying goodbye from us. Let's go round the team. Blaine, why don't you say goodbye first?
Yeah, indeed, Peter, it's been a pleasure broadcasting here from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you very much to all our guests. I hope that you, the viewers, have learned as much as we did on this special, or on this COP17 and on the issue of climate change. Thank you very much also to the team at the SABC who's put this all together. For now, let's just check in with Asanda. From all of us here, take care. Bye-bye.
Indeed, Blaine, it's been a very interesting 2 weeks. I've also learned a lot about how to recycle a waste site into a real productive land. I've met young people here who are tracking the negotiators, but also I've learned a lot about how the negotiations can be stretched out to the late hours of the day, as it will happen today. So from us here at the Tea Garden and around Durban, it's been great. Have a good day.
Yes, indeed, it's been an interesting 2 weeks. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I've learned just a little bit more about climate change. It's been really great. From the team down here at Palmit Nature Reserve, it's goodbye.
Well, that's it. That was the team. And for me also, thank you very much indeed for watching us. Have a great day.